In the past several weeks, Elon Musk has spoken over and over again about useful compute per watt and AI as it relates to that. And while this is generally important, I'm starting to suspect that it actually has a lot to do with one particular product that Tesla is making. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, a huge thank you to everybody who watched my video from yesterday on both YouTube and Twitter. Yes, I've cross-posted on both of them just to see, and the video is fast approaching 100,000 views on YouTube, which is mind-blowing. That's definitely going to be the fastest to hit 100,000 ever, and it's also got somewhere around 20,000 views on Twitter as well, so wow. Very, very popular video. And of course, since people seem to have loved the Cybertruck stuff, I wanted to show off this t-shirt as well. It says, "Don't mess with Tesla," right there, you go. So anyway, you can grab that in the merch store as well. And if you're watching this on Twitter, because I will be posting this on there, I will make sure I put that in a comment underneath the original post. So anyway, don't mess with Tesla. Super cool shirt. You can, at least if you want to like walk around and make people think that you're talking about don't mess with Texas, but then they look closer and they see don't mess with Tesla. Anyway, I want to look yet again at the XAI Twitter Spaces and what Elon was talking about. That 42 to 46 minute mark is really, really full of treasure troves. So I'm going to dial back time just a little bit before what we were talking about in yesterday's video. And I also want to give a big shout out to Dusty, one of my Patreon patrons, for crystallizing this in my brain. I'd been thinking about this stuff and he mentioned something and I was like, oh gosh, of course, that makes perfect sense. So anyway, I first want to look at about the 42-minute mark in the XAI Twitter Spaces, so you can check that out yourself, or of course, just listen to what I've got here. And if you haven't seen my other videos related to this, I will put those up here and also in the description to make them easy to find. But what led up to Elon Musk's comments about Tesla and everything was actually useful compute per watt versus a human being. So let's take a listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to understand the universe and not tell anyone. So yeah, I mean, when I think about like neural networks today, it's currently the case that if you have 10 megawatts of GPUs, which really should be renamed something else because there's no graphics there. But if you've got 10 megawatts of GPUs, cannot currently write a better novel than a good human. A human's using roughly 10 watts of higher order brain power. So not counting the basic stuff to operate your body. So there we got a 6 order of magnitude difference. That's really gigantic. Now part of I think one could argue that 2 of those orders of magnitude are explained by the activation energy of a transistor versus a synapse. You could argue that account for 2 of those orders of magnitude, but what about the other 4? Or the fact that even with 6 orders of magnitude, you still cannot beat a smart human writing a novel. So and what also today, when you ask the most advanced AIs technical questions, like if you're trying to say like how to design a better rocket engine, or complex questions about electrochemistry to build a better battery, you just get nonsense. So that's not very helpful. So I think there's we're really missing the mark in the way that things are currently being done by many orders of magnitude. It's being heavily, it's basically AGI is being brute forced and still actually not succeeding.
So you can hear Elon talking about a 6 order of magnitude difference between what's going on in my head and your head, which takes about 10 watts. I'm going to have to trust him on that. I don't know that for a fact, but anyway, I'll assume that he knows that fact pretty well on his own. But you've got about 10 watts of power to do higher order thinking in your brain, not including bodily functions and stuff. And then it's about 10 megawatts to operate a large language model at scale and to produce answers. Now, yeah, you could probably cheat that a little bit and you could probably run it on more like a desktop machine or something with a refactored and quantized version of a smaller large language model, but still, we're talking about a great deal more power than 10 watts to operate this stuff. And that makes a really big difference for Elon. He's talking about how with these 6 orders of magnitude, in other words, about 1,000,000 times more power than a human being, it still fails at that, and it can't do fundamental discoveries in physics or rocketry or engineering or whatever it is that you're asking it to do. And then, of course, he gets to the part where he says, basically, we've just been brute forcing things and it hasn't even worked well, which I believe ties into, of course, what he and the Tesla full self-driving AI team have been been coming up with. They've been cooking up something which is, as he said, much simpler than what they did before. They've overcomplicated things. They realized how much simpler it is. And part of that probably has to do with power as well. So next, let's take a look at a tweet that Elon put out on June 30th. So in response to a tweet from Ray for Tesla, who was talking about the Chinese copying Tesla in terms of the architecture for their full self-driving, Elon Musk responded in a little bit of a non sequitur. Tesla is shifting emphasis to diffusion for compute efficiency, but will probably drop even that. No company is anywhere close to Tesla in useful AI compute per watt. So the first part of that tweet I have talked about previously. I'll put a link to that up in the corner so you can check that out yourself. Basically, it's saying that transformers are not the most energy efficient way of calculating something, and the argument can be made that convolutional neural networks in the form of diffusion models are actually more efficient and can model the same thing. Technical debate that's going on currently right now. We will see what happens. But for our purposes, it's that last sentence that matters. And that is that no company is anywhere close to Tesla in useful AI compute per watt. So why does this matter to Elon Musk so much? Let's start with the server clusters and everything. And Elon often makes jokes about the number of different GPUs, and he says, not GPUs, but whatever you want to call them, tensor processing units or something like that. These things that do lots of calculations. They purchase a lot between Tesla and Twitter and SpaceX. They purchase a lot of NVIDIA GPUs, and they're also, of course, bringing Dojo online to make that even bigger. So from that standpoint, yeah, they're burning through a lot of electricity. They have a lot of hardware. There's a lot of iron that they're pushing this thing on. And of course, that's very, very expensive, but I don't believe that's what he's really getting at. That's just sort of the cost of doing business and developing things. So the second thing, and probably what you all are mostly thinking about, is the Tesla full self-driving hardware on vehicles. And Tesla full self-driving hardware 3 operates at somewhere around 100 watts nominal power. And if you assume something on the order of an 80 kilowatt hour battery pack in a Tesla, I mean, obviously some are bigger, some are smaller, whatever. But let's just take that. Today, we're going to be dealing with rough numbers here, so don't get mad at me if I don't have the exactly correct thing down to a decimal point. We're just ballparking here because the whole point is to ballpark this and to show why the third product that I'm not talking about yet is what really matters here. Anyway, if you look at an 80 kilowatt hour battery pack with hardware 3 running at a nominal 100 watt rate, you're looking at something like 33 days worth of power if you were just running that software by itself and not driving the car. So, that's a long time. The car could sit there for a month in your garage and do full self-driving calculations and not run out of battery power. Give or take, right? It's going to be doing other things and stuff, but just in terms of the full self-driving hardware 3. Now, if we turn to hardware 4, greenly only, and others have suggested that hardware 4 runs at approximately double what hardware 3 does in terms of the power draw. So we could, guesstimate somewhere between 150 and 200 watts to operate that full self-driving computer. But even at that kind of power, we're looking at somewhere between 17 and 22 days or so of power. So, the moving the car around part takes way more battery power than running the full self-driving hardware, whether it's hardware 3 or hardware 4. So we can also sort of push that to the side because the compute power, it does matter because eventually the hardware boards, the boards will not be able to do that much compute. So it is going to limit the models that can run on them. But in terms of power envelope and all of that kind of stuff, in terms of useful AI compute per watt, there's still a lot of headroom, even with hardware 4, even if it is running at 200 watts on the car. You're getting a lot of compute. It can go for a long time on the battery. And yeah, it's very important to get useful compute per watt because you've only got like 150 or 200 watts in hardware 4, but still you have an awful lot of battery power. So what is Tesla's other big up and coming product besides the vehicle? The thumbnail probably gave it away. Yes, it's Optimus, the Tesla bot. This is where things start to get interesting. According to Tesla's own slide when they presented Optimus, the battery pack in Optimus will be around 2.3 kilowatt hours or about 2,300 watt hours. And from the looks of things, it looks like what Optimus is going to be running on, or is probably currently running on, is a sliced in half hardware 4 board. So in other words, instead of having 2 completely redundant systems on one board, which is super critical for an automobile because it can't fail, you can run half of that on Optimus and get away with half the power envelope. So if that that's the case, and using my rough numbers, we're probably looking at 75 to 100 watts to operate the full self-driving board, whatever. I don't know. They need to rename this something else. It's not full self-driving hardware anymore. It's a full autonomy hardware or something like that. But anyway, in order to operate that, you're looking at somewhere between 75 and 100 watts, which gets us down to somewhere between 23 and about 30 or 31 hours of useful time only running the autonomy hardware, which doesn't include any of the movement of the actual body or anything, which will also obviously draw a great deal of power, which means that roughly you're looking at 3 to 4% of Optimus's actual operating capabilities. In other words, its battery power is being utilized to just do the autonomous software. And that's a pretty reasonable amount. That does still mean that it has 95+% of the power to do the actual movement around and everything, but that's a significant draw. You were looking at a negligible amount coming from full self-driving hardware, either 3 or 4 in an automobile because the battery packs are so big. But with the smaller battery pack, you're actually looking at a significant percentage of the compute power is being wasted on the autonomy software and not being used to do any useful work like pick things up or walk around or do any of the stuff that Optimus needs to do. And it's my belief that a combination of the fact that these mobile compute devices only have a certain power envelope of 100 to 200 watts, somewhere in that area, and the fact that Optimus in particular can only operate a certain amount of time on that 2300 watt hour battery pack, that's making Elon Musk and the Tesla AI team think long and hard about exactly how much compute they can get for every single watt of power that these hardware boards can give them. And that, I believe, is why Elon is so laser focused on getting compute power per watt, and why he's particularly proud of the team's work, right? A lot of teams like OpenAI or Google or something, they effectively have infinite compute. They don't have infinite, but gigantic orders of magnitude. It's not mobile compute devices. It's these giant server farms in the cloud. And you, of course, send your request to them, whether it's search requests or whether it's an AI request. You send that out, it does its thing, it takes a huge amount of power, and then it sends you back the answer. This is not an option for an automobile, and especially for a humanoid robot that has a very, very small power envelope that it's working within and a small battery pack that it's working within. And that, in my mind, is why, transformers, even if they work well, if they're too energy inefficient, if they're too compute inefficient, they're going to turn to convolutional neural networks, diffusion models, whatever the next big thing is. They will keep looking for the thing that can not only solve the problem, but solve the problem with the minimal amount of energy needed. And of course, that ties into the last couple of videos that I did where I talk about end-to-end world models and how important that is. So if you can create an architecture that's kind of one more monolithic architecture, but is relatively simpler than what Tesla's been dealing with all of these, inputs and trunk and outputs and heads and all of this stuff, the simpler you can make the architecture, the more efficient it is for you to be able to do compute on that. And again, it doesn't really matter how much energy and time cost the training is. What matters is the output, the thing, the inference engine that's actually on these mobile compute devices. And that's what really matters to Tesla's AI team, because of course they have to operate on a mobile device. They don't get the luxury of having these things operate on a gigantic server farm. Honestly, if that was the case, they would have solved full self-driving. If you could stick 1,000 GPUs in the back of your Tesla, then we would have full self-driving already, but you would get about 10 feet down the road, and then of course you would run out of battery power. So you'd have to bring a big extension cord behind you and run it like that or something. But of course, given the reality of the small power envelope, and especially with something like Optimus, the small battery pack, it's really, really critical that Tesla squeezes out every ounce of compute and AI that they can get out of every watt of power. And interestingly enough, this is going to have a downstream effect if and when Tesla is successful. It sounds like they are very successful. Elon is very excited about it. Ashok is very excited about it. Phil was very excited about it. There's a lot of people who seem to be getting very excited about Tesla's AI. But if and when they get this solved, they're not only solving real world AI, but they're coming up with a methodology to do it on a very tight power budget. And that's going to be good for all of us, because that means that my desktop computer, perhaps my laptop computer, perhaps even my phone or something, may be able to run a very sophisticated AI on it in the future. And my guess is that Elon's other company, xAI, is going to be very focused on that as well. They're going to expend the compute resources to try to figure out how to do it, but one of their goals is going to be to make it small enough that it runs on desktop or mobile devices. And that's going to have really amazing downstream effects for all of us, not just those of us driving cars and not just those of us using Optimus, the Tesla bot, but everybody who wants to use AI in their lives. It will be much better if you can run it for low power on your local computer than having to go through the cloud to do everything. And I will just say personally, I am all for decentralizing AI to have as many AIs out there as possible, not just a few monolithic ones. That this is also very much to the good, because if you can run a really sophisticated AGI on your desktop computer, that gives you a lot more control of it than if somebody like Google or OpenAI or whoever has the control over that AI. So what sounds at first like sidelong comments and not very important stuff, this useful compute per watt is actually critically important, and I for one am super excited about it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this geeky episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so YouTube's algorithm will know to show it to other people, and maybe Twitter's as well. You never know. I'm cross-posting these days. And of course, consider subscribing to YouTube and or following me on Twitter for more of this kind of stuff. And please, by all means, comment in either of the forums. I would love to hear what you have to say about all of this as well. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course my Twitter subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, or a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.